My grandkids laughed at my old phone. They said it looked like something from a museum. What they didn't know is that this phone built the very company that pays for their fancy new ones. I didn't yell, I didn't scold them. I just showed them the truth and watched their smiles fade into silence. If you've ever been laughed at for being old-fashioned or left behind, this story's for you. Because sometimes the quiet ones with the oldest phones hold the most powerful stories. They say technology connects generations, but that day it only reminded me how far apart we'd grown. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. My daughter had invited me over for lunch. The whole family was there. The smell of roast chicken filled the house. Kids were running around, phones in their hands, faces buried in screens. I sat on the old couch near the window, scrolling through my own phone, a beat-up 10-year-old model I'd grown attached to. Its screen had scratches, the battery barely lasted an hour, and the case was held together with tape. But to me it was more than a phone, it was history. It had seen everything. The late nights, the risks, the mistakes, the miracle that changed my life. My youngest grandson, Adam, noticed it first. "Grandpa," he said, eyes wide with amusement, "is that a museum piece or an actual phone?" The others burst out laughing. Even my teenage granddaughter pulled out her sleek latest model and placed it next to mine. "Look, guys," she said, giggling, "side-by-side comparison, old versus new." Their laughter filled the room. Their laughter echoed longer than it should have. I smiled, the kind of smile that hides a sting. My daughter tried to hush them, but the damage was already done. I looked down at that old phone, its faded screen glowing faintly in my hand. For a moment I felt small, like I didn't belong in this fast, shiny world anymore. But then something inside me shifted, because they didn't know. They had no idea what that old cracked phone meant. They didn't know it was the same phone I used when I built the foundation of my company, the very business that paid for their school fees, the car their mother drove, and the vacations they bragged about online. I took a deep breath and looked at them again, their faces glowing in the reflection of their screens. I remembered being that age once, thinking I knew everything, laughing at what I didn't understand. "It still works," I said softly. Adam snorted. "Barely." They went back to their jokes and I stayed quiet. Because I'd learned long ago, silence can be the sharpest response. But that silence wasn't empty. It was calculated. I watched them, how they compared specs, how they argued about cameras and storage like it defined their worth. And somewhere between their laughter and pride, I saw something heartbreaking. They didn't value effort anymore. They valued appearance. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my car for a long time before driving home. I looked at that old phone lying on the passenger seat, quiet, loyal, and familiar. And in that silence, memories began to flood back. I remembered the nights I stayed awake, coding, testing, failing, and trying again. Back when I couldn't afford a new device, when this phone was my only tool, my only friend. It was through this very screen that I closed my first business deal. Through this speaker, I heard my first investor say yes. Through this camera, I captured the photo of my first office, a garage with broken tiles and a single desk. This old phone wasn't outdated. It was proof of every hour I spent fighting when no one believed in me. Proof that you don't need the latest gadget to make something timeless. The next morning, I decided to teach my grandkids something their schools never would. Not through lectures or anger, but through an experience they wouldn't forget. I called them over again the following weekend. When they arrived, their faces were buried in screens as usual. "Put your phones away for just 1 hour," I told them, smiling. "I want to show you something." They groaned, but eventually agreed. I led them to the garage, the same one I'd started in, now cleaned up but still holding its history. I opened an old box and took out a framed photo. Me, much younger, standing beside that very phone with tired eyes and a hopeful grin. Their expressions changed. "Wait," Adam whispered. "That's the same phone?" I nodded. "Yes, the same one that helped me build everything you see today." They went silent. The kind of silence that means realization has started to sink in. I placed the phone gently on the table between us. "It's not about the model," I said softly. "It's about the mind that uses it." My granddaughter's eyes softened. "But Grandpa, why didn't you ever upgrade?" I smiled. "Because sometimes the things that got you through your hardest days deserve to stay with you through your best ones." For a moment, the air in that small garage felt different. heavier, quieter, meaningful. The kids didn't look at their phones. They looked at me. We spent the next hour talking, really talking, about effort, patience, and failure. I told them how I used to sleep on that very floor, waiting for my code to compile, how I skipped meals to pay rent, how I almost gave up. But this little device kept me connected to hope. By the time we walked back inside, the laughter was gone, replaced by something deeper. Respect. Later that evening, as they were leaving, Adam hugged me. He slipped his sleek new phone into his pocket and said, "Grandpa, I think I get it now." That night I sat alone again, not out of sadness but peace, because for the first time, they understood that the old man with the old phone wasn't behind the times. He was the reason their times existed. A week later I got a call from Adam. He sounded different, calmer, more thoughtful. "Grandpa," he said, "can I come over? I want to ask you something about business." When he arrived, he wasn't holding his phone like before. He had a notebook instead. He sat beside me, eyes curious. "How did you know your idea was worth chasing, even when everyone laughed?" I smiled. I didn't know, I just believed. He nodded slowly, writing that down like it meant something sacred. For the next few hours, we talked about things that no smartphone could ever teach, about failure, rejection, the beauty of persistence. He listened closely, as if afraid to miss a word. Before leaving, he looked at my old phone resting on the table. "You still use it?" he asked. I chuckled. "Of course, it's been through everything with me." He smiled softly. "Maybe I'll keep my old one too, just to remember where I started." That one sentence, that small realization, meant more to me than any award I'd ever received. Because that day, I didn't just teach him about business. I taught him about life. That's the thing about respect. You can't demand it. You earn it quietly. Through consistency, through proof, through patience. That old phone had seen my failures, my heartbreaks, and my victories. It wasn't just a relic. It was a reminder that growth doesn't come from upgrades. It comes from endurance. A week later, I got a call from Adam. He sounded different, calmer, more thoughtful. "Grandpa," he said, "can I come over? I want to ask you something about business." When he arrived, he wasn't holding his phone like before. He had a notebook instead. He sat beside me, eyes curious. "How did you know your idea was worth chasing, even when everyone laughed?" I smiled. I didn't know, I just believed. He nodded slowly, writing that down like it meant something sacred. For the next few hours, we talked about things that no smartphone could ever teach, about failure, rejection, the beauty of persistence. He listened closely, as if afraid to miss a word. Before leaving, he looked at my old phone resting on the table. "You still use it?" he asked. I chuckled. "Of course, it's been through everything with me." He smiled softly. "Maybe I'll keep my old one too, just to remember where I started." That one sentence, that small realization, meant more to me than any award I'd ever received. Because that day, I didn't just teach him about business. I taught him about life. That's the thing about respect. You can't demand it. You earn it quietly. Through consistency, through proof, through patience. That old phone had seen my failures, my heartbreaks, and my victories. It wasn't just a relic. It was a reminder that growth doesn't come from upgrades. It comes from endurance. Years later, I was sitting in the same living room. My grandkids were older now, each chasing dreams of their own. Adam had started his own small company. He named it Old Spark. When I asked him why, he smiled. "Because Grandpa, sparks don't care how old the wire is. They just need current." That line hit me harder than I expected. I realized then my story had already been passed on. Not through inheritance, not through property, but through perspective. And that, I think, is the greatest legacy anyone can leave behind. Later that evening, I picked up my old phone again. It was barely functional now, screen cracked, battery dying, but it still lit up one last time. I opened the gallery, scrolled to that photo from decades ago. Me, younger, tired, smiling beside my dream. I whispered to myself, "We made it." Then the screen flickered and went black for good. I didn't feel sad. It had done its job. And maybe that's what we all are. Like old phones. We may fade, we may slow down, but if we've built something that lasts beyond us, then we've already won. Weeks passed after that moment. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the dark screen of that old phone, not with sadness, but gratitude. It reminded me that even endings have beauty. when you know what they meant. One evening, my daughter called. She said Adam had shared our story at his university, how his grandfather built an empire with a broken phone. She said students were moved to tears, that they clapped, and not for success but for perseverance. When I heard that, I didn't say a word. I just sat quietly in my chair, sunlight touching the framed photo of that old garage. It felt like life had come full circle. People think revenge means hurting those who hurt you. But the sweetest revenge is proving them wrong by living beautifully. I never shouted back at those who mocked me. I just built my world quietly, brick by brick, dream by dream, until the laughter faded on its own. And now, years later, my silence had become my loudest answer. That's the kind of revenge no one can take away from you. Not through hate, not through pride, but through purpose. If you've ever been underestimated, remember this. You don't need to show off your worth. You just need to become it. Because one day the same people who doubted you will tell your story to inspire others. And that, my friend, is when you truly win. Tonight, as I sit by the window, the city lights flickering in the distance, I realize life isn't about keeping up with the new. It's about honoring what carried you through. This old body, this tired mind, this fading memory, they're all like that phone. They've done their job. They've built something that will outlast them. I smile as I hear my daughter laughing in the kitchen, my grandkids talking about starting something of their own. Their voices echo through the walls, full of energy, ambition, and hope. Maybe they won't remember every lesson I taught them, but they'll remember the story. And maybe, years from now, when their own devices grow old, they'll look at them and say, "This got me through." And if that happens, go even once, then every moment, every scar, every sleepless night will have been worth it. The old phone may be gone now, but the connection it built, between generations, between effort and reward, that will never die. So to anyone listening, don't chase the latest. Cherish the lasting. Don't be ashamed of your old tools, your slow start, or your scars, because sometimes the things people laugh at today become the very things they'll honor tomorrow. Sometimes I think about how time changes everything, the people, the world, the noise. But what never changes is the meaning behind your struggle. Every generation believes they're the smartest. Every young man thinks he'll never grow old. And every old man quietly watches them, smiling because he once thought the same. The world keeps spinning faster. Technology keeps shrinking seconds into moments. But the values that build greatness, they're still the same. Patience, effort, faith. That's the foundation I built my life on. And no algorithm, no app, no machine can ever replace that. I've seen trends rise and fall. Companies explode overnight and vanish just as fast. But the things that last, they don't trend. They're built in silence. You see, people always chase speed, but real success happens slowly, like a tree growing underground before it ever touches the light. And maybe that's why my story isn't just about an old man and his phone. It's about every person who refused to give up when the world said they were done. Every soul who kept pushing, even when no one clapped. So if you're listening right now, and you feel unseen, unheard, forgotten, remember this. The world laughs at you before it learns from you. So keep going, keep building quietly, because one day they'll tell your story the same way. Years later, I found that old phone again, tucked away in a drawer covered in dust. Its body was cracked, buttons stiff, battery long dead. But as I held it, memories came alive again. The long nights, the small victories, the moments no one saw. I realized something that day. We spend so much of our lives chasing what's next that we forget to honor what got us here. That phone wasn't powerful, but it made me powerful. It was my reminder that tools don't create success. People do. I placed it inside a glass frame and hung it in my office, not as a trophy but as a teacher, because every time someone walked in and asked about it, I told them the same thing. This old phone once built an empire, and it still teaches lessons that new ones can't. Now whenever my grandkids visit, they stop in front of that frame. They look at it, smile softly, and nod. No words needed, because they understand now. What seemed like a relic was really a symbol of time, of growth, of quiet revenge through success. And when I see that, I know my work is done. Not the company, not the money, but the legacy. Because someday they'll face their own laughter, their own doubts, their own broken tools, and maybe then they'll remember my story and keep going anyway.